Hey, this is a hard panel to do when we're at lunch because people want to eat and it's hard to pay attention while you're eating. It is for me anyway. But I wanted to introduce this panel. As you guys know, artificial intelligence is the new buzzword, and it's hard for a lot of people because it's hard to understand what it is. How many people here feel like they have a complete grasp of every attribute of artificial intelligence? Raise your hand. Is there a maven out here? How about anybody that doesn't even know what it is? Can you raise your hand if you don't even really kind of understand what AI is? Oh, wow. Okay. So Rahid, one of my panelists, does not know what AI is, but that's okay. Hey, artificial intelligence it's scary in a way because it has the capability to do things without human intervention. I've been using it for probably about last year when it really started to drive. The other panelists here have done it a lot longer. But it also has the capacity to help what we are doing at Coleridge and amongst all of your data in multiple ways. We're going to go through the panelists real quick, but I wanted to give you an idea of where we stand with AI currently, and then I'm going to hand it over for the panelists to introduce themselves. But Coleridge is intending to use AI in two ways. One, to help with data export triage so that we lower the composite risk of data export, disclosure, and spillage of maybe PI, PHI, or any other sensitive information. I think that's a good use of AI. The second is to allow researchers within the ADRF and in a closed environment without AI being able to get out of the environment but just stay trained model inside of the enclaves, is to be able to allow research to ask questions about their own data, train it on their own data, in addition to whatever model was trained on, probably Llama 2 is what we're thinking, but be able to export the data through an AI capacity, and also be able to write your questions to AI and have it summarized in the export. Whatever that response is will allow you to export those call and responses as well. That's sort of what we're thinking about. I'm open, I'm here all day. If you guys have ideas, please come talk to me because I'd love to talk to you. Okay, I'd like to introduce our panel here. We have a esteemed panel on the list here. We have Rihad, who is a professor of machine learning and public policy at the great University of Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh. He is sitting next to me. Would you like to introduce yourself, Rihad?
Sure. Rajdhani, as Rich said, I'm at Carnegie Mellon University, and most of my work involves spelling AI. I don't do any AI, I just spell it. It's really easy to spell, which is why everybody is an expert in AI. But most of my work is really working with state and local governments on developing tools that broadly sort of use AI. And we'll get into this conversation, hopefully, I think there's sort of this, when we talk about AI, different people mean different things. Right now, I think what Rich means is ChatGPT type tools, but that's probably the least useful part of AI today for all of you. So hopefully we'll get into the conversation. Looking forward to the conversation with the rest of the panelists.
Hi, I'm Adam Leonard. I'm the Chief Analytics Officer at the Texas Workforce Commission. My entree into this space is probably like many of yours, that when ChatGPT came out, it was really kind of magical to be able to kind of start to see the beginnings of what I'll call the Star Trek future, right? We all watched TV. We saw Spock or somebody talk to the computer, ask it a question, and get an answer. Now, the computer didn't really come up with answers that it just made up on the spot that may or may not have really, reflected reality, but it was still very magical to see this thing happening. And so I got super interested in it. And then the more I looked at it, the more I began to realize that this wasn't nearly as magical or as revolutionary as we had thought about. I mean, it was a very interesting technology, the generative AI, but ultimately, the other things that we're doing in AI and advanced analytics and decision-making really are just natural extensions of what's been going on for 20, 30 years, going back 40 years with regression modeling and things like that. All we're talking about here is an acceleration of what has already existed. We're talking about taking techniques that are incredibly powerful and taking them to an exponential rate of change. And I think that's going to be an important thing for us to consider here as we go forward, that these techniques have existed and we've been able to use them. It's just now the cost of doing so is so much lower than it used to be. And barriers to entry are far lower as well.
Hello, everyone. I'm Josh Richardson. I'm the Chief of Staff at Indiana's Department of Workforce Development, and I'm probably the least technically knowledgeable about the subject matter of anybody that's on the panel today, but I've spent almost 17 years at the Department of Workforce Development through the unemployment insurance shop, and more recently in the last few years in the workforce development side of the house. But I think part of the reason why I'm on the panel is I've been part of a team in Indiana that has implemented sort of a recommender system algorithm to UI claimants using our administrative data, using our SLEDS data to generate recommendations as a matter of course as part of the unemployment claims process, where they can then learn about what we would suggest to them based on successful outcomes of similarly situated individuals after job loss. So that's why I'm part of the panel, looking forward to continuing the discussion.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nicole Nicola. I'm the Director of the Division of Economic and Demographic Research at NJDOL. I do agree with the other panelists. AI is a big thing, and I think about it like 30 years ago when computers came out and we didn't know how to use them, and now they're part of our daily operations. So I think AI is going to be something like this. However, I do find ChatGPT to be useful, especially if we're automating certain tasks and we want to generate codes. I do find it very useful, and I think that the way we're looking at it at NJDOL is that you have a lot of younger generations entering the political arena, and they're going to come to us and ask, what are you doing to be innovative in terms of AI, in terms of ChatGPT, in terms of our statistical software? So we're trying to prepare for the questions that will come in 5 and 10 years. So we kind of have a long vision, and we started dipping our toes in AI, and we do different initiatives. And we feel that if we are able to adopt AI with time and experience, we can create more legitimacy and credibility and lend more assets to our staff to produce quality data that will help politicians, businesses, nonprofits, and many others adopt healthy decisions based on evidence.
Okay, thank you for introduction. I'm going to just ask a couple of questions. I know you guys had some of the questions ahead, and he'd asked me to throw some zingers in him towards him because he felt like these were basic. So, but I do want to ask, boring. Well, I was trying to use better vernacular, but let's ask the panel here. What do you feel like AI can? How useful do you think AI could be in government? Maybe using something like our platform. How do you envision in the future, in your guys' individual positions, how AI could be used to maybe enhance the use of data, maybe democratizing data or for underserved communities? How do you see that going? And anybody, please take the question.
So the way we're doing, we're using automation, and we're using ChatGPT to be able to answer questions. I think this is not working. In and out, yeah. Thank you very much. So what we're trying to do is answer questions swiftly. So we get questions like, how many disabled individuals work in the labor force and what type of occupations? We are able now to answer them within 30 minutes. It used to be a day or two to download the data from the American Community Survey, to look for the data. Now we're able to do it with fairly swift and not much time. Another thing we're trying to do is automating repetitive tasks. I don't know how many people work with OEWS data, but we have a staff of about 7 people, and every 6 months we have to assign different folks different tasks and different accounts. That takes about 5 hours, so on average we spend around 10 hours a year. So if you think of 10 years, that's 100 hours that we're just doing one thing where we're assigning accounts. So we're working right now on our code to generate and automate this function. And then we're hoping that individuals can focus on more important tasks, more strategic thinking tasks. So that's one thing. Another thing, I don't know if Yvette is here, I can't see her. We have created the R-NASWA group, which is an idea that came from Dr. David Schmidt, and it came from our wonderful Assistant Commissioner at NJDOL, Leslie Hirsch, and Yvette, where we created a group where we come together as a community and share our codes to help us automate things. So we did a session on regressions, on American Community Survey. There's really a lot of ways for us to automate simple tasks. And the idea, at least for NJDOL, we want to be able to raise awareness that we have a fountain of data that can help you improve decision-making processes. So come to us. So if we raise awareness about this, we raise our value, and potentially we can add more resources. A lot of us struggle. There's always budget cuts every year. So we're trying to say, here's why we're valuable. And then when they come to us to ask us to do more, then we ask more money. Now, we're happy to do it, but I have staff who's dedicated for this. If you want us to do the extra, if you want us to adopt AI, here's what we can do. Another thing we did recently, which we published last week, and I don't know how many people heard about it, it's the, I think it's called My Career, I'm looking at the name, mycareer.nj.gov, where we took 400,000 resumes and mapped it to our wage record. That was through AI. And then job seekers now can go to this website and see how people moved from entry-level jobs to where they are now. It's kind of the evolution of their career. And then if I'm an entry-level and I'm a job seeker, I can go to this website and learn about job training, about career path, about tuition assistance. And we did it all through an AI, which this project was led by, I don't know if I mentioned this, Assistant Commissioner Leslie Hirsch, and another wonderful colleague called Nancy Hiller. So we're kind of at the beginning of AI, although this project is more advanced. But in terms of LMI, we are trying to look at ways to adopt cheap options, because we don't have money, obviously, to try to start with things that we can access for free, like ChatGPT, like R. And ChatGPT is great in terms of coding, in terms of even like spitting images, strategic management decisions and planning. So there's a lot of things that you can do as an introduction if you're not able to access an advanced AI system at this point.
Well, Nicole, I appreciate that, because it almost stems into the other topic, which is how you're prioritizing AI. So great business case. I'm curious, Josh, being Chief Staff at Indiana Workforce, Indiana being a Hoosier state, a lot of workforce people working hard in Indiana. How do you expect to use AI? Can you prioritize it? Is there some way you can use it? Have you thought about it?
Well, so I think first, reading the question, how do we prioritize it? I think like most of us in government, we prioritize our AI initiatives based on what's going to fund them, where we're going to get the funding stream from that. So that's part of it. But I think also, we're really trying to make sure that we're looking both at the potential return on investment in terms of the added value to that user of this AI tool, but I think also trying to be really careful about the potential downside risks. And so, again, from where I'm at, we typically treat our house as the two different sides, right? The unemployment insurance side and the workforce side. And we're seeing all kinds of potential use cases. I don't think most of us are going there yet, to use AI to do things like adjudicate claims for benefits. And the potential for risk, the potential for harm from some sort of a generative AI questionnaire that results in an actual decision that impacts that individual. It's exciting in the sense that it's also a very expensive, very time-consuming process now. Can be frustrating for individuals in high volume periods, but the risk of wrong decisions there and the consequences of that are so high that I think we're still a little ways away from that comfort level. Now, what we're doing in Indiana with the recommendations on occupation, I think is a lot less risky, in the sense that it provides this person information that otherwise would be hard or difficult to obtain, but really still empowers them to sort of react to this recommendation, right? We're not recommending, used this line before, but not recommending which sort of medication they take based on symptoms or a questionnaire. Instead, we're asking them to consider things that they otherwise may not have thought of, but really taking information that would take them a long time to process. You all, I think we're really proud of what we're doing in our LMI shops, but for the average user that's trying to figure out, hey, what do I do after job loss? It's an overwhelming amount of information. And I think that AI's potential to consolidate that information in a quick way, but to give that person an opportunity to respond is helpful. So when it comes to prioritizing it, obviously, figuring out how we're going to fund these projects really does sit sort of high on that list. Where do the dollars come from? But also looking at I think more in this case than even other tools, not just the return on investment, but also the risk of harm.
Nice. And anybody else from the panel want to talk about the use of it in the future, maybe? Please.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Nicole was talking about was a lot of how do we improve the efficiency of the workers using AI, right? We're doing the same thing as we used to do, just faster. So it frees up people to do other things. I think there are two other uses, right, which I think Josh was hinting to for one of them, which is improving what we've done in the past. So we're not replicating what we have done in the past, but we're trying to do better than that. And that's one of the big potentials is sort of early warning systems of different types, right? People who might get unemployed, people who might drop out of high school or college, or people who might get sick. So those are the things that humans have been pretty bad at in the past. That's another area. The third area is, so we can improve efficiency, we can improve effectiveness, how well systems work. The third area, which is the biggest potential, which you were hinting to, is improving the equity in outcomes and the services we provide. And that's the area we're least focused on today from the AI perspective. Right? What AI is really good at today is doing what we have done in the past, just faster. So if you like the world you live in, you just want to be more efficient, use AI. It's great. It works wonderfully. If you don't like the world you live in, then don't take off-the-shelf AI. Figure out how to adapt it. I think hiring is a really good example. There are a lot of hiring tools out there for AI. What do? They take existing hiring practices and scale them. So they say, well, I want to get rid of the recruiter and the interviewer, and I just want to make the same decision I made yesterday, just cheaper. And that's where the problems come in, right? So I think the question becomes, AI has the potential to do all of these things. What do we want it to do? How do we start with that policy values up front and then procure, adapt, customize the AI to help us get there, rather than sort of just take off-the-shelf things, which is cheaper, but may not get us where we want to get to.
Yeah, I would love to build on that, because what you're saying is, and the real danger in what you're saying is not just that what we're going to do is become way faster at making bad or indifferent decisions, is we're going to abdicate responsibility for those decisions, right? Because now it's just, well, I'm just doing what the computer told me to do, right? The computer, and the computer was trained on our practices, so, we're following policy, right? Well, that's a problem. So I'm going to take it and flip it in the other direction and say that if you are concerned about equity and outcomes, one of the things is that is a very hard thing to study. Not as an academic, but as a program operator or policymaker. To actually look in your data and see what's going on and understand whether or not there are disproportionate impacts on different populations, that takes work. You actually have to dedicate staff and time to do that. But with AI and a good data set, you can automate this stuff. You can basically point it at all of your programs and your populations and the outcomes and build control charts that will tell you when you're kind of getting outside of a reasonable level of variance from the norm. And then now you know what you need to be looking at. You say, this program really seems to be affecting people within this kind of group. What are we going to do about it, right? And so AI can be as much the problem
or as much the answer as it is the problem. And so it's all about, like any other tool, how do we use it? And if we use it for good, then we will get better.
Cole, I have a question for you. So I know you're involved and you have a lot of thoughts on AI. Can you maybe describe how states regionally could use AI together, maybe in an ADRF or a product?
I don't know if George Puntham is in the room. He left already. Okay, thank you. But one way we're thinking about it is, and that's part of the opportunities, if we can integrate data, for example, we can look at, AI can help us look at the patterns in the data and the challenges in the data. And can we, as a result, present some policy solutions? So bias is a big issue in AI. And one of the reasons why we're taking baby steps towards AI, like ChatGPT, like R, is because we want to take into consideration the bias that could happen, the results of using certain data. Certain populations are more represented in certain data. So think of LinkedIn, for example. It's typically people who work in an office that are represented on LinkedIn. Or think of retail jobs. Typically, you don't see retail jobs online. So there is a way for us to work collaboratively as states together. And one way I think of this is if we work together and we integrate data together, it could also help us if a commissioner or a governor hears New Jersey's doing something, it could help Texas or California. Like, oh, I want to do it too. It's that domino effect that could help us. So I typically try to learn what other states are doing through Coleridge or LMI Institute or NASWA, where they put events together. I want to learn, and then I take that idea and say, North Carolina's doing this, Mississippi is doing that, so we can learn from them and capitalize on their expertise and bring it to us. So there's a lot of benefits of learning from each other, and that's why we have the NASWA R group, which has been successful thus far, and we all come together and present data and see how we can work together on different initiatives. So really I don't know how many people represent the LMI unit, which is part of my division, but it's so critical because we, the LMI folks, we produce the data to the users. So if we can learn from each other and produce the best data, think of policymakers, and then they can make decisions based on concrete data that we collect. That adds a lot of value to them and to us, and we benefit our communities. The way I'm selling AI to my staff, because it's hard. It's like, oh, I have to learn a whole new thing. It's very, very annoying. But the way I'm selling it is, think of the business sector, right? They collect data and use technology to increase profit. We collect data to help our communities, our vulnerable people, our poor people, to highlight when there's a bias in the data and why it's important to help certain communities. So we collect that data and then we go to policymakers and say, here are the patterns we're seeing in the data. So AI can accelerate that learning curve, but we have to be, ultimately, I don't buy the idea that AI will replace jobs. We in our division created a whole group, economists and researchers, and all they're studying is the AI's impact on jobs and occupations, and we just started in the past 2 months. But think about how we can study this and then inform policy decisions and use AI to our benefits, and taking into account as managers that we should be cautious in taking this technology with a grain of salt.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm going to talk, so we were lucky to have Rahid on the panel because not only is he a professor at Carnegie Mellon, he does this, but he also is heavily involved as a board member for Coleridge. He understands AI, understands our mission. So Rahid, and we have a ton of academics in this room. We have data experts and evangelists for our product. How do you see AI with helping researchers in the data analytics world as far as the data sets that could be on Coleridge as an academic? Maybe tell us what your perspective there would be.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm seeing over the last year of the AI hype is people are people's bosses are skipping the data infrastructure conversation and jumping to AI. Like, we need to buy AI. Well, it's $50 a month. Check the box, you've bought AI, move on, and now go back to what you really need to do. And so I think somehow, because it's so easy to use and buy, and nobody sees the massive data infrastructure that lies behind each of these tools, people are thinking we don't need that anymore. And I think that's the conversation we kind of need to sort of highlight, is for all the state and local and federal agencies who want to use it. You can use it for the generic things like helping you write code or doing some searches or spell checking or writing things. But the hard stuff that we're working on, the data infrastructure is more important than ever, even if you don't use. I mean, one thing is, you're not going to use that AI tools off the shelf. You're going to have to tune them, which means you need your own data. OpenAI spent the last 3 years so the ChatGPT is trained in two ways, right? One, it's trained with just all the data on the internet. But second, it's trained with sets of questions and answers. So they hired humans to ask questions, and then they got answers, and they annotated them, and they spent several years doing that. If we're going to have to tune it for our needs, we're going to have to do the same thing, which means we need data infrastructure. And then when we use it, we're going to have to evaluate and see if it actually does what we want it to do. For that, we still need the same data infrastructure. And so I think that need is even more acute now than before, because the worst thing that can happen is we start using these tools without having any clue of if they work, if they don't work, who they work for, who are they leaving behind. And I think that case needs to be made collectively, right? A lot of you are probably making that case individually right now in each of your states and each of your agencies. And I think the scariest part as an academic to me, especially somebody who teaches in an AI department, a machine learning department, is none of us know how this works. That's the scary part. I mean, you might sort of think, I don't really know how AI works, or we were talking about, I'm not an AI expert. I am an AI expert, and I have no clue how this works. My colleagues who are developing these tools have no idea. They couldn't explain to you why it gave them that answer. And so I think the next couple of years are going to be really trying to figure out why it works, when it doesn't work. And so the more we can build test beds and collaboratives where people are, because again, all our needs are very similar, right? Yes, each state is special, but pretty much the same thing is done across with different budgets and different politics. So I think that's, for me, the potential is if we combine together and create these collaboratives, not just data, but expertise, test beds, so that when we build these tools, try out these tools, we can learn together, because there's a lot to learn about these new things.
I think that's a great segue into the coping mechanisms that that leaders in this room who are in a federated, each state, each federal agency, and just different organizations, on how you're going to improve the understanding of AI within your organizations to enable it. Because as my esteemed Hoosier friend here told us, that it doesn't matter unless you have funding, but it also, you have to get funding, you have to influence. And so I want to kind of go through a little bit of that. I'm going to show you, if you guys are struggling and you need a coping mechanism because everybody's struggling with what AI is. Everybody thinks they understand it, and then they get into it and they realize it's really deep. It's like an onion. It has multiple layers. It was a well-designed technology. It's probably, in my opinion, just from what I've learned, it's probably as revolutionary or more than when the era of the internet came. And with quantum computing coming online, we really have a capacity that scares me in a way for cybersecurity, because encryption might become a thing of the past. But the capability is unbelievable. And what I'd like to do is I'm going to show you what the President of the United States says about AI. And kind of what they think about it. I'm going to go through some of that. But before I do that, and then afterwards, I'm going to show you, that's not funny. I'm going to show you, we're going to open up to questions, okay? So let me start real quick. So can anybody tell me, has anyone seen the directive, the presidential directive that came out from the White House on AI? Can you raise your hand? Okay, that's awesome. Okay. Did you know what it meant? Did you read through it? There's a funny thing, does anybody know what Reddit is? Have you ever heard of Reddit? Okay. So there's they got kind of hazed because it was one of the longest presidential directives they ever put out. It was like 30 pages. And nobody really could have the time. Not nowadays. If you don't do it in 2-minute bites, no one's going to pay attention. Yeah, like TikTok. With the slide master, I'm on HDMI. Can you help me? Okay, so they had to create a fact sheet. The first time I think they've ever done this. I have some experience here. And they just kind of went through it for people who want to use AI. And it talks about creating, I'm good, brother.
You said you were playing video right now.
I'm good.
Oh, you don't?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. I could play a video if you want me to, sir. I'm not sure. What they're doing is they're basically telling you there's some standards. They want to implement standards. They're struggling with this too. Because they're not sure what they're unleashing. It's like if you remember from all the old people in this room, the internet age came about and people are like, what are we doing? What is this? I don't need a landline anymore. I don't have a pager. Well, this is kind of what the White House is struggling with. But they did give some really good standards. And they want to make sure, the first thing they start off with is training. So if you want to influence your states and your federal agencies on AI, you got to get them to understand what AI is, like really understand it. And I love the conversation about ChatGPT, but I've learned recently, ChatGPT is not AI. I mean, it is, but there's so much deeper offerings to AI that's helpful. I don't know if you know this, but does anybody here think that you can run AI without the internet? Does anyone do you believe you can run AI without the internet? Raise your hand. Okay. You actually absolutely can. I'm running it on my laptop. I can't show it to you right now because it takes everything off. All the resources go down on this laptop, but you can run AI without the internet. It can be locked into an enclave. So that's right. But to get to your state to understand that, you have to do some training. You have to educate yourself as well. And that's pretty much what this edict is learn about it, develop standards. And then they really start off with, they talk about learning, but the second thing is really, let's protect about using AI in a dangerous, but for things like biological materials, things that it can really do to harm society. Because AI can do that. There's all the stuff on Reddit, like how to make a bomb, ask AI, they change those. But those models that they have that are in AI now, there's a ton of models. Some of them are not restricted. So you can ask questions that you may not want to know the answer to, but there are nefarious uses of it. And it's saying, look, we're going to try to restrict that. I wouldn't necessarily tell your state leadership about that or your federal leadership, but just say that if they have questions, just say, hey, there are models that are fully restricted from doing bad things. It's really important, whatever you do, and I'm sure there's some CISOs in the room or CIOs, whatever you do in the AI world, you have to implement a degree first up about cybersecurity. How is it going to impact? One of the first things my boss, Ahu, had asked me to do when I started talking about AI, because we started using AI internally to do things, to write things. But when you use AI like ChatGPT that's on the internet, you're putting your data out it doesn't forget. They're recording that data. I mean, I hate to say this, I don't know what they're going to do with it, but it's a closed system. It's not open. When they say open AI, it's not. It's closed. They have your data. They're going to harvest your data, is what I suspect. This is editorial. So be careful what you put in there. It doesn't go away, and AI doesn't forget, kind of thing. So that's what they're suggesting, is like if you're going to use AI in your state and your federal government, just make sure that you understand there's some cybersecurity implications to it. And then they talked about the privacy. And you guys, all of us in this room we're interested in availability of data and linkages and producing research, but we're mostly interested in the privacy, people's right to be forgotten, which is like the GDPR in Europe, which is a great thing. The fact that you can say, I don't want anyone to know about me anymore, I'm done, kind of thing. That's what they're suggesting, is don't hurt the privacy of the people that are using AI. And then finally, they're talking about the thing that's very, very important, is about using the AI focused on things that'll help underserved community and civil rights, and equity of data and things like that. They're very important. AI has a capacity to really help the underserved community in a way that, it may be hard, untangible to kind of see how that would work, but I promise you it's there. And we've talked about in the last panel extensively on how that might work. So I gave you some coping strategies, a whole bunch to this policy directive, but I thought it would be great to see what the senior leader of our country, free world, is saying about AI. This is a great primer for you to start if you wanted to use it in your environment. Okay, is anything of the panel want to talk about this? And I'm going to open to questions otherwise.
I'll add a couple of points because there's a good mix of both excitement about the potential for AI and the fear of it. But I will say a couple of lessons that we've learned along the way as we've worked towards this. My CIO was really helpful in implementing our tool, and Wright had mentioned a little bit sort of the data structure conversation that we were skipping over that. But I do think these AI tools give us the opportunity to make a case for the funding for some of these data structure initiatives that have long been difficult before. Why would we be interested in doing that? Why should we invest in this? And having potential use cases out of this are helpful. And so one of the things that my CIO said early on is, we want to make sure that even if this AI project falls on its head, that we have some sustainable, tangible assets left after we do this work. And data structure has been a really big part of that. But the other thing is the potential for some of these tools to help you advocate for data collection that have been difficult to before. And so one example of that is partly based on our message around what this tool can potentially do. We were able to convince our legislature to add SOC codes to new hire reporting in our state new hire directory. And I think that's been a message that in Indiana, very red, employer-friendly state, sort of the idea of any new reporting requirement on an employer was generally viewed as it's a very difficult thing to get our legislature to buy into. But in this case, because we could make the case about having that SOC code data so much earlier than what we could ever get it, even in wage records, which is hard enough, but by getting that information earlier, that we could generate more accurate results. So I think those are things where we have better use cases that allow us to make the case for both data infrastructure and for some data elements that otherwise were hard to obtain.
Okay, I'm going to open up to questions, and please be bold, ask questions. This is a great time for us to build a community. So anything that you would like to know, or any comments or thoughts, or anything we said that was, well, not me, but what Rahid may have said that was wrong or anything? Please. Oh, in the very far back. There's a microphone up here, though, ma'am. You may have to walk up here.
Thank you, Richard. So I had the opportunity to engage in AI projects in the context of higher education. And the work was really enriching. It was great. It was a great collaboration with faculty, a few students. And in the work, I became more, I wouldn't say concerned, but more aware of the risks involved with AI. And that led me to then reach out to the EdSafe AI Alliance, which is an alliance that is international in nature, and they're really, trying to raise public awareness in the area of education, of the benefits and also the potential risks associated with safe AI. And just recently, the EU came out with regulations that really, kind of draws the line on some AI projects in a very, very straightforward and obvious way. And for some in the innovation space, maybe they're feeling like, oh, it's limiting innovation. But for me, as someone who's very concerned about AI and its current and future impact on humanity, it's kind of like a sigh of relief, because it gives us this guardrails, at least in the present, to know what is right or wrong. I'm not a philosophist, and so I can't spend all of my time trying to anticipate what might go wrong. So I think this list that you showed us, Richard, is really helpful as well, but it's not as stringent as what they came out in the EU.
I appreciate it, Michelle. Is anybody else in the room concerned about the use of AI? Is there big concerns? Would you like to talk about it? Ma'am, you raised your hand. There's the microphone. I think, come on. What are you concerned about? Yeah, AI's listening. Just give us your fake name. That's okay. What are you concerned about?
I think what's been mentioned about AI reinforcing bias.
No, that's great.
And not very careful, AI will make some very dangerous assumptions based
Yeah.
on current
Yeah.
disproportionality.
And so her point is that the AI could be used to enhance or exaggerate bias in people. And I would suggest that that's already happened.
But I think we should be careful. The root cause is not AI. The root cause is us, right? So we are the bias is caused by people, and then the people who designed the AI to propagate and amplify that bias use it. And so AI is sort of it's just there, and it's sort of, it's difficult to fix AI without fixing people, right? If we're not going to fix our policy, we're not going to fix AI. So it becomes tricky where some people will say, well, the way to fix AI is to put in good data. We should only put good data. Well, we all know there's no such thing as good data, right? Like, it doesn't exist. And you can fix the data, but the way these algorithms are designed is, the most important thing that goes into these algorithms is they make mistakes, right? And when they make mistakes, you have to tell it which mistakes are going to cost more than others. And that's the only way they learn. Like, every time they make a mistake, they try to fix themselves. But if you say, look, every mistake is equal, well, that's where the racism and the sexism comes from. Is that if you say, well, I don't really care about, it's just every mistake is equal, everybody's the same. Like, well, no, some people have been biased. It's the world is not fair. So I think you have to kind of very deliberately take your policy and implement that policy into the AI tool, which becomes tricky, right? So the executive order you talked about is a really good start, but 90% of the executive order says, Agency X, you should spend the next 3 months coming up with some ways to avoid this. The wonderful example, the EU AI Act, it's very good, but it has some really, really large carve-outs. The biggest carve-out is for law enforcement. They can do whatever they want. Anybody who's doing border control, they can do whatever they want. So there are huge human rights issues there. There are migrant rights issues there. Again, nothing is perfect, but I think nobody's gotten it right so far. And I think the biggest effort going on in the US right now is NIST, kind of, over 20 miles north of here. And I think that's where they've been tasked to figure out a lot of, what does it mean to operationalize these things? What tools need to happen? What benchmark? What metrics? And so I think everybody's hopeful that that becomes real, but I think that's kind of because otherwise it's just people's opinions. Like I think Josh and I were talking before, he was saying, well, we're doing these recommendations, and the way they fixed the tool was they removed race and gender. Well, that's one of the worst things you can do, because then you don't even realize that there's bias, right? And we're talking about it is that's an easy way out. I think if I close my eyes, then the world is fine. The world is not racist. So I think it's complicated, but I think there's a lot of potential that if we come together and take our values and tell the tool developers to do that, I think that's where we can make an impact.
It's a great point. You guys use Google Home, or Alexa? That depends on which. My daughter the other day asked at Google Home, I'm on the beta for Gemini, which is their AI. I'm lucky to be part of this. And it's part of our Google Home, which I kind of knew but didn't know. And she asked it if she was trying to boil eggs, and said, how long should you boil eggs? And the Google Home said, I need to talk to your parent. And I thought it was unbelievable. It scared me, actually. It's like it's in our house listening constantly. It's smart. And so that had me, for the first time, I'm like, maybe I don't. I'm a little worried by it. So any other comments? Sir, please. Yeah, if you'd like.
So I have a concern that I raise at every conference about corporate takeover of public decision-making.
Of public what, sir? I'm sorry.
Of public decision-making. And in particular, all of the public agencies that we work with use data products. I'm from K-12 education, so think about a student information system. Student information system are for-profit companies for the most part. And what they're all doing right now is they're coming to all these conferences and they're saying, I've trained an AI algorithm on 45 million students' data worth of stuff, so I'm going to sell you back an algorithm based on this. And so my question is, as I was thinking about what you were saying about, like, well, you got to train data, you got to have right to be forgotten. All right, so When a student information system signs a contract with a school district, there's a data destruction requirement that says that if I no longer work with you, you will destroy my data. I have a question for all of you. When one of your vendors sells you an AI product and you turn it on, whether you know it or not, are you ever able to delete that data again?
Okay, so.
Did you turn it off?
I'll answer that question. So there are, when you sign, sir, I appreciate your point. When you sign up in your life, you don't know you do this. From every application you ever use on your iPhone to things that you have a third party, you're basically saying, I'm going to give pretty much third party access to this information.
As an individual, yes, but.
Oh, no, I understand. Right, but those same vendors, we put our data on, let's say, Google Cloud Platform, and there was no intermediary like an ADRF or Coleridge. I don't know what they do with your data. That's scary. For us, we're going to our plan is to put a contained AI model that's generic, so you could ask questions and train your own data. As part of our process, when you leave our environment, we absolutely destroy everything. We destroy the AI, the model, everything. That's the plan. We do that now without AI. We're going to do it with AI. And we are really, we've refined that. There's a John Mills, I don't know if he's in the room, but he has spent the last month and a half refining our data destruction policy so that we don't make a mistake, because there's also, we don't want to also delete Federal Records Act, FOIA information. And just because it's in a contract, I don't necessarily want to delete it. Not because I want to hold on to it, because I don't. It's like toxic waste in a way. But I want to make sure we don't delete something that was supposed to be regulatory or through a magistrate or something. But we absolutely, that's why a nonprofit, and I'm not selling Coleridge, I'm just telling you, that's why a nonprofit's a good place to be, because we don't care about we're all about your privacy. We don't care about selling it to anybody for anything. We're there just for the fact that you can do research as a facility. So I'm glad you guys are here, because this is part of but thanks for that pitch that led me to do that. Any other questions from anybody? Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jess Neely. I work at the American Public Human Services Association. And I'm curious, like kind of pivoting back to the practical use cases, do you all see the potential of AI to help us solve the messy, unstructured, like data discrepancy problem? Because I would love to move on from trying to solve that problem to solving the problems that we find by analyzing that data. So I'm just curious what you all think, and maybe it's Adam to start. I'm not sure who makes the most sense.
Just to clarify, the data discrepancy problem, if you could just give me 2 sentences
I'm
on what you
thinking
mean.
about sharing data across agencies. So that's what I work on, and the way that fields are structured, or names are misspelled, or someone has an accent in their name, those kinds of things.
So the technical, yeah, absolutely. Artificial intelligence can be incredible in terms of solving those problems, but it's not going to solve the bigger problem, which is a cultural legal problem, right? That these agencies have to first have the will to want to share the data with each other, and then impose that will on their attorneys. And what I mean is that support functions, which data is a support function, so too is IT, so too is our attorneys. In the world of attorneys, I tend to think of that there are 2 ways to look at your job. One is that your job is to get an answer, and the other is to get the answer. And an answer, the answer is always no, because if you look in the law, you can always find a reason to say no, right? Like there's lots of no's. To find the yes, that takes work, right? And so you have to have a culture that says that your job is to find a way to legally, if at all possible, get to a yes that allows your organization to meet its policy and goals and mission that leaders do. So if we can solve that part of the problem too, then the technology is absolutely something we can do in this space. And we have seen lots of people are starting to use it to kind of bridge these divides between systems. Heck, in my own agency, I don't have the legal problem, but we've got, I don't know, let's say 20 different case management systems, and you'd be shocked at how many different ways phone numbers are tracked. Because sometimes it's a dash, and sometimes it's no dashes, and sometimes it's dots, and sometimes there's parentheses in the first, right? And so you have to clean all this stuff. And that's a relatively simple example, but the point is just like it gets to what you were saying, that there's a lot of different ways that you can track this information, and if it's it would be really nice to have some really simple automated ways to go ahead and connect it all together. But yeah, I mean, the value in working with this data is not the connecting of the data. It's once it's connected, you know, extracting the insights from it.
Josh, any thoughts there?
Well, I mean, I think that as a direct answer to the question, I do think that it's going to help with that, but you know, it goes back to some of these earlier questions we ask about how are we going to, you know, prioritize our use cases? How are we going to make sure that they're in the best interest of our people? So I won't spend too much more time talking about it because I think, yes, I think it certainly is going to help us do some of this record linkage that has sometimes been prohibitive to moving forward with a lot of our projects.
I will point out that AI likes to hallucinate. It's an artifact that people didn't realize it would do, and I mentioned in the last thing, I put the large language model on my laptop, closed. My name is Rich Ferguson. I asked AI about me, and it thought I was a magician. So, and then I go to find out, if you look up Rich, there's a very famous, I didn't know until I learned through private GPT that there is actually a magician out there, and I asked him a lot of questions about my life, and he gave him his. So it does hallucinate. So the problem with data gaps is, you know, you guys have heard the saying, data in, data out, good data in, good. If you have big gaps, I don't know if AI is going to be able to help you there. It might actually hurt, from my perspective, is it may make up stuff that have nothing to do with your data. So there's some careful, you got to still do the triage and still got to oversee it, and then have confidence in it. The language models are getting more, as you could imagine, they're getting more and more mature. So we're at 3.5. ChatGPT is sort of the benchmark. It's turned into this quasi benchmark. 3.5, if you know the difference between ChatGPT 3.5, which is online, and 4, is at 3.5, it passed the bar, don't quote me on this, passed the bar exam for California at like 25%, and ChatGPT 4 passed it at 100%. So that's how much more, and that was only about a 6-month change in the model. And then Grok, which is Twitter or X's, has done it 10 times more. And it took like 8 years for them to train the model for ChatGPT. It took Grok like 4 months to train the model. So it's rapidly moving in that direction. I think there's going to be an inflection point where the large language models will be tapped out. They won't be able to increase anymore, and that won't be because it's not based on the programming, but based on the resources that it consumes. Just this 48 processor, 128 gig laptop could not run my private GPT, so I tried to put on AWS, and I don't want to tell Ahu this, but it was $3,500. I decided not to do it, but that's how much resources it takes without having a graphics processor unit attached to your machine, which is how it does its calculations. So, what other questions do you guys have? There's some people always on the edge, like, should I ask? Should I? Just ask. Who cares? It gives us a chance to talk. Okay. Any other questions? You guys want lunch back? You still got 10 minutes or 20 minutes. So, okay. I think that summarizes. I hope you guys get a chance to see this next year. We're gonna be showing you AI in the ADRF. I'll give you my personal assurances. So, any other questions? I think that'll it. Thanks, panel. Appreciate it.